Are we outsourcing too many critical decisions to AI? Welcome to Decisions That Count, the podcast that dissects the science behind decision making and hopefully empowers you to optimize your cognitive functions. I'm Dr. Shawn Watson. I'm a neuroscientist and an entrepreneur, and I'm hopefully here to guide you through some of the complexities of the human brain. Specifically, my research on decision fatigue has shown me how critical it is to understand the interplay between our brains and the technologies that we use and create.
And I'm Michelle O'Brien. I'm a mum, marketer, marathon runner, proving that even with a busy life, we can all make better decisions. I'm here to hopefully translate the science into real-world strategies that you can implement today.
I am so excited for today. We have a remarkable guest. He's a visionary in the field of AI. He's led the charge in deploying AI solutions in critical industries across the globe. He's a thought leader in ethical AI deployment. And more importantly, he's a Canadian. So please welcome Luis Gonzalez.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, Luis, this is just such a pleasure to have you here. And I'm going to try and keep up with you both.
I'm going to try and keep up with Luis.
and also try and not bring this back to Skynet.
Please do, actually. Everybody has that question. And I don't think I go through any interview without the Terminator question, I call it. So
yeah,
it's a good conversation to have. Yeah.
This conversation and this topic, I think, is arguably one of the most important things for society right now, because AI is developing at a pace that is just incredible, insane. I went from not even, theoretically thinking about it to using it every day in my own life. And I imagine a lot of people are as well. But hopefully where we'll get to today is kind of the intersection between the human brain and maybe the limitations there and where you see AI going, where it is and where you see it going. So maybe the first question for you, Luis, is you talk about this idea of human-centric AI. Maybe you can just give us kind of a rundown of what that is compared to more algorithmic AIs.
When we first started doing AI, and I guess, we inherited a lot of the original ideas from Alan Turing, for example, in the early 20s. The reality was that we focused too much on the algorithmic side of things because obviously the mathematics are interesting and it was seen as an academic problem. But once the elements were there for us to build it, when you had the right compute, when you had the right amount of data, when you have the right models, the only way for us to operate AI or to create AI that actually is easy to use is by focusing on how humans will interact with it. This is where the problem of AI started as a research problem. Then sometime around 2020, 2018, it became an engineering problem. And as we sit today, AI is a design problem. How do you enhance human cognition? And there's a current of us that a lot of those Canadians actually that are very much the universities that led the revolution of deep learning. Because, you're Rochelle Benjo and Jeffrey Hinton were University of Toronto, University of Montreal. We started thinking about how do you think of symbiosis, humans and algorithms working together, because intelligence at the end is the measure of good decisions. If you look at a dog and it's figuring out a way to get a treat from you, you appreciate the ability, the decision-making that he does to get that treat from you, whether it's wagging his tail or doing something cute. In a similar manner, humans and other beings improve their decision-making by the information they gather. So if we want to operationalize AI, you have to focus on the quality of decisions that you're making and the information you're using for it. So when we started thinking of new paradigms to design the algorithms, we had to really observe how humans behave and how humans think. That's why we call it neural networks. At the end of the day, we were trying to simulate the way that humans process information to arrive at the best possible outcome for a solution. And that requires a decision structure. So today, our biggest problem right now is how do we design this technology that is now relatively proven to enhance human cognition so that humans and machines can make better decisions together than independently. And that's why a lot of the current from automation, originally current from automation, has kind of deferred a bit because it makes no sense to automate something that you don't understand. And the only way to understand is to see how it interacts with humans.
I love that thought because I think it's what we've even heard from industry sometimes is they're looking for AI to offsource decision making, just to pass it off to the machine to do it and remove the human component, so to speak. Whereas your idea, AI, or what you just spoke to, if I understand it, is AI is just a tool, a companion to our cognition to help us, make better decisions at large.
There are parts of human components that you want to remove. Politics, bias, the inability of humans to handle non-linear relationships. Humans love things that are causistic, right? This happens, then this happens. But we don't understand multi-complexity, multicollinearity, right? Relying on a human for making an objective decision using politics is the wrong paradigm. So you want to remove that from humans. But there's an element of humans that is just much better for them to do, which is creativity, exploration, the ability to generalize, not to understand a problem on its own, but how it interacts with the rest of the ecosystem. Today, we still need humans for that. So
Today.
exactly. We can talk about general intelligence later, but from the perspective of where we are, empowering humans to be optimizers of their function, to create hypotheses about what else to do, to use their intuition for what their intuition is good for, and removing some of the daily, high volume, low complexity decisions away from them is a good way to extract the best out of humans and to use algorithms for what they're good for. Mm-hmm. So that's where this whole design paradigm, as a design problem, comes, is that the better designs of AI today are the ones that are thinking around human cognition, not to replace it.
I would just like to come back to something that you just touched on then, which was Fukushima.
Oh yeah.
So, would that situation have ended differently if AI was making the decisions?
Very much so. One of my first work tasks given to me when I joined GE in Asia, I was the chief data officer for GE Power in Asia, was to do a study of the Fukushima control systems, because it was a GE Hitachi plant. And I think the NDA is expired, so I can now have a conversation about it.
We'll check that.
Yeah. No, it is. It's 2015. The reality was that there were some very specific decisions that were not taken in the right time because of hierarchical politics considerations. The last thing you want to do in a nuclear reactor is to think about politics. And if you look at both accidents, actually, there's a movie about Fukushima, so I can talk about it because there's a movie that explains that. Or Chernobyl, there's very critical decisions that needed to be made with the right data in an almost automated way, that in both scenarios, politics got in the way. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't what was right to be done, was what was the perception when it comes to the party, to the population, to the control, to be honest. In both cases was actually protecting the government from that. Mm-hmm. And by the time you define that, it's too late, right? And that's exactly, in a nutshell, I mean, we can go more in detail, but in a nutshell, there are things that you do not want to leave in the hands of humans, such as nuclear reactor safety.
Yeah, what we're saying is we cannot trust humans to make the right decisions when it comes to something like nuclear power.
That's a bit stern.
Okay.
There are complexities, science-driven complexities, because this is one of the problems with engineering, right? Science sets up, let's say, alchemy, right? This is how a reaction happens for dynamite to exist. And you get a Nobel Prize for that. Actually, Nobel received his prize based on the creation of powder, the stability version of powder powder that we have today. But when you try to turn that into chemical engineering, you have to control the procedures in a way that is deterministic. And as Shawn really knows, science is not deterministic, never is. So the birth of chemical engineering happened because a plant of BASF in Landau, Germany, exploded because they were using TNT to unlock ammonia pipes during the winter. And one abnormal heat day created enough powder, basically, to be able to blow up the entire town. So engineers put in place for the purpose of safety, but the reality is still science processes. There is so much complexity in science that you cannot rely on a human to understand all that is included in the decision they're making. So you have to reduce the decision into a very small element. And humans need to be trained based on those small elements. An algorithm doesn't, not anymore. I would say that there are processes that have too many complexities for one human to do the timely decision. Maybe if you give that human enough time and maybe a group of humans, you can come up with the right decision in 6 months. But the problem now is that you don't have 6 months. You have 30 seconds.
And I guess add in that stress. And we always talk about decision fatigue on this podcast, right? So that human probably isn't even in the right state of mind to be making quality decisions when it matters most, right?
Fukushima is a great example.
Yeah.
The decisions need to be made at 2 a.m.
So
You got a control cycle that at some point you're reaching a fatigue point that no Red Bull is going to give you the clarity.
Yeah.
So what do I do with a reactor that is beginning to burn, right? To melt.
So if the power industry is outsourcing some of these critical decisions to AI, should we start looking at other critical decisions that should be outsourced to AI?
Look, I'm a big believer. After that report, I swing back to autonomous power plants. I thought that the future had to have autonomous power plants. With the work that I'm doing right now, which is taking a plant that has an operation paradigm, which was really valid in the late 90s, early 2000s, and making them operate like it was 2025, right? You realize that the biggest secret there is the empowerment of people. So it's not the autonomous power plant that's going to make it happen. It's the reallocation of human capabilities to where it's better used. So if I have a control room and they're exhausted and they're working 12-hour shifts, that's a misuse of human potential. Educating them and let them be optimizers, let them come up with use case scenarios. So what if we do this and what if we do that? Use their intuition and even some of their ability to generalize. What does this decision make to a market, to a population, to with the weather that we have? All those other factors that you don't necessarily have the ability to have data on. It really helps you optimize the algorithmic function. So for me, it's more about empowerment. I've gone back to the part where I think critical infrastructure requires humans to be empowered so that they focus the energy where it's best taken advantage of, say it that way.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, maybe to take it from critical infrastructure, which I mean, I think every human on the planet can agree to, control of nuclear reactors for it. How about like day-in-day interaction? So when we talk to different folks about decision fatigue, quite often they use AI as the excuse to say, hey, Shawn, we don't need to worry about decision fatigue because AI is taking over decisions for us. And just to recap, so decision fatigue for our viewers, if you haven't heard us before, so decision fatigue is caused when you make lots of decisions over a period of time and essentially hit a capacity or a limit for the number of quality decisions your brain can make. This wasn't a problem for our parents, right? Our parents were making hundreds of decisions a day. Now we're making something like 35,000 decisions a day. So there's actually a physical limitation of the brain for decision making. And you hit a point where your brain starts to adapt to try to handle all of these decisions, and the outcome or the consequences of that aren't really what you want to see or be beneficial. So I say that just because people say as an excuse that like, well, AI is taking away our decisions, but our argument back to them, and which hopefully they came around to our view actually, is AI is actually compressing decision-making in certain situations. So if you go to the office and, as a researcher, I'd maybe spend 6 hours researching, and then I'd be able to summarize the facts. I can do that in 6 seconds now with Gemini or ChatGPT or something like that. Yeah. So I have the results, and then I need to make a decision about them. And then I'm on to the next projects. So what it actually does is it compresses the number of decisions I'm making in a day, or more importantly, it's compressing the number of important decisions I'm making. And decision fatigue happens faster based upon the complexity or the importance of a decision, right? So hearing all of that, critical infrastructure aside, do you still think AI, the role of AI, should still be human-centric? Should it still be designed to empower humans? Now, not a nuclear reactor, think like an accountant at Deloitte. Yeah, or something like that.
Let's talk about your calendar, right? And you're saturated your weekly calendar. My view of things is that whoever thinks that AI should take our base decisions and you don't worry about it, they don't understand AI very well. AI needs to learn from something. These are learning algorithms. That's the better word for it. Actually, I don't think it's accurate to say artificial intelligence because we're still learning what intelligence really is.
Neuroscientists would agree.
No one knows, right? Yeah. What we're really doing is learning algorithms. We're learning how to learn with applied mathematics, right? But it needs to learn from something, from somewhere. There's got to be an overall governor of those decisions. Now, I'm not saying you monitor every decision that AI does, but you have to have the ability to understand what AI is doing. There's a whole field of study in artificial intelligence called explainable AI for this reason. Because it's not that the decisions made by AI, is that can you understand and govern the fact that it's taking that decision? Can you attest that is the right decision? So the compression is absolutely true. Now the interventions of human interaction with AI need to be a far more fine-tuned. You need to have the ability to process faster because that's what AI demands from you, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at your calendar, if I had an orchestrator of my time, an AI agent that is orchestrating my calendar, I would need to define for AI the subtle differences between being late for a dinner with my wife versus being late for dinner with my boss. Mm-hmm. Maybe if I already made a few mistakes at work, this particular Friday, let's not be late for a dinner with my boss. But maybe I got in trouble with my wife last week because I forgot her birthday. This is one dinner you do not want to be late for. And these constraints are not deterministic. Mm-hmm. They're highly contextual based on what I call generalization, understanding what's happening in the world, what's happening in your marriage at that moment, what's happening in your job at that moment. Mm-hmm. And what are the acceptable substitutes for that decision? This is the responsibility of humans. Generalization and contextualization of the context of intelligence is a human responsibility. Mm-hmm. You can never give that to AI.
Right.
So this means you have to structure the design in a way where your time as a human is only focused on that optimization of the decision so that you don't get saturated by it. Because the prioritization of decisions is what makes them relevant or irrelevant, is what makes them impactful, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not optimizing as humans, effectively what you're doing is you letting decisions run wild, like hiring a new intern to do something they don't understand what to do. They will get something wrong. Well, think of getting AI in your home equally hiring 1,000 interns. Someone needs to tell the intern what to do. And that's perhaps for me the better way to explain it, is that you need to look after, you actually need to develop a lot of consciousness around what are the top decisions I need to make and defend those. Defend your time, your understanding.
Will we ever have like personal AIs? I'll have one that's just for me that I rather than every time I open Gemini, I kind of open a new message, or a new chat. It's ongoing. It's forever. You're constantly talking to it. You're constantly maybe like, in the morning, hi to my personal AI. I'm not feeling so great today. But it's controlling everything, and it's almost your AI.
Based on research of the 5 stages of development of AI. The hyper-personalization stage 3.
Okay.
Then there's 2 stages more. Right.
Okay, let's start.
But let me tell you what happens in your home at stage 3.
Okay, go.
Which is the orchestrating stage. Right. Mm-hmm. Today we're in stage 2 right now. We're going from stage 1 to stage 2, which is focused tasks. You have Grab that can tell you at what time to leave your home because you want to be at this place at this time. You have, let's say you have the most modern LG refrigerator and you know when things are going to go bad, right? And these are very isolated, independent optimization algorithms, right? That help you with you orchestrating your own. But when you get to stage 3, which is the one that you've described, is now your algorithm based on you, not on the task. The task is already covered. We know how to optimize your taxi rides, but how do we optimize them for you? That means which route you prefer to take, what kind of thing you want to be late for, and what kind of thing you do not want to be late for, what kind of ride you want to ride, how much money are you willing to spend to take these rides. Sometimes you'll take the train, sometimes you want to take a nice car. All this context about you, we're just beginning on that stage. And that hyper-personalization will happen individually first, in your closet, in your food shopping, in your transportation, in your calendar. And you'll see this series being developed. Mm-hmm. When you get to stage 4, they go from one individual for task to one orchestrating for your entire life. if you watch the movie Her, is it? I think it was the one with Scarlett Johansson. I think it's Her. That's exactly what happens. It's able to take all the individual aspects of your life that need cognitive assistance and becomes your personal assistant. And this is the really cool part. It doesn't only help you with your commercial, it helps you with your mental health. Imagine that when you were born, your kids, definitely your grandkids, will have a AI-like partner, friend, almost like a journal, to tell them all their secrets, all the things they're feeling, etc. And it's going to start coaching them through mental health.
Wow.
By the time they're 15, 16, they'll be such a critical part for them to be better adjusted humans because they'll do the things that their parents are not able to do.
Consistent, dependable, like all those things. Yeah.
That's a world I like to see. I don't know if I'll get to see it, but it's definitely one that I get to see because it means we suffer a lot through trauma of other people. The example, Trump, is the example of someone with a lot of trauma. And the impacts of those people sometimes affect society in its entirety. And if you had an assistant that coached you through mental health throughout your life, then you could expect people to reach their own potential regardless of who their parents is, right? So that's an example of orchestration that would eventually happen through agency.
I love that. I love that idea of actually having this personal assistant or companion through life. It feels somewhat disconnected from life, though, at the same time.
Have you tried journaling with ChatGPT? Try it. Try it for 15 days. I did this to my niece. She's 17. And I encouraged her to tell ChatGPT all her secrets, all the things that she's dealing with. Right now, when she interacts with ChatGPT, ChatGPT makes jokes on her. Tries to make fun of her. Starts figuring out ways to know, I know you're not going to do this, right? And she showed me an interaction of how ChatGPT was kind of bullying her a bit because her sense of humor is pretty much like that. It's very sarcastic, right? And she lives in Ireland now, so she's got a lot to draw from. Let's put it that way. And I was really surprised of how well ChatGPT was able to build a representation of my niece, at least her sense of humor. So the underlying AI, that's what I mean, is a design problem because the underlying engineering that would allow for this companion to occur, it's already in place. Yeah. We just haven't built the app to control some of the stuff that ChatGPT will do to make it useful. Yeah. But that, if you try 15 days journaling with ChatGPT, you'll be very surprised at the responses you're going to get.
I have a lot of questions.
It's part of my job.
No, I guess first before the journaling thing, because that's just fascinating to me, is why don't, because we've talked to so many people now and a lot of business leaders, why don't they, like your reasoning makes perfect sense. And I think it's how we need to look at AI, right? But a lot of leaders we speak to, they're ignoring the human component. And because their measures of productivity could be like, how many clicks of a mouse, how many strokes of a keys, how many meetings are in your calendar, right? And AI can compress it all. But like actually the quality of those decisions or the quality of the work that the person is producing, you hit a limitation of the human brain, right? Like what maybe in your experience, or why aren't more people, is it because AI is so new and you're just so ingrained in it? Are traditional business leaders having trouble adapting to it and they're forgetting about the human brain?
Okay, I have a theory.
Okay.
Because I've thought about this a couple of times. And the current job that I'm doing, or the current projects that we're doing, have given me a new paradigm on why I think we struggle with this. One of the first things is most of the education that leaders go through is routed in an education system that we're meant to build workers. Workers are a human equivalent of a machine. If you think about it, our education system is pretty much rooted on Bolshevik Russia in the 1890s, right? How do you build workers, like factory workers? So the robotic aspect, the deterministic, don't question, the over-reliance on processes. If you think what a process is don't think, follow, right? That has created leaders that don't have critical thinking. the new generation of leaders, especially the ones that go through startups, you realize that you cannot lead by process. It'll kill you as a startup. You need to lead by context. That means explain what's going on and rely on the human being intelligent enough how to adapt when things change. Because the one constant we know now is that everything's going to change. Mm-hmm. The other reason I think this happens is because leaders are not under enough pressure. I've come to learn that innovation is not an exercise of playing with your Legos and having fun. It's not kindergarten. Innovation is an exercise of having someone choke you and figure out a way to wiggle out of it. If your business does not have enough pressures, the right pains, you're not going to innovate anything worth anything. One of the reasons I love working in the Philippines, when it comes to the power industry, they have all the right pains that represent what the world really needs. Super expensive electricity, naturally distributed islands, 5 typhoons a year minimum, need to grow because they need to economically grow with a young population, and need to reduce carbon footprint. You talk about the unsolvable problem of power. But because they have the right pressures and they don't have a status quo, they do not have an option to not do it. They're under the right pressure. They put in the right corner to figure something out. Mm-hmm. And that's what innovation is. So whenever I talk to a leader that doesn't understand humans or doesn't want to understand humans, it's because they are hoping for a world where treating people like workers was good enough. In my view, that's a lazy leader. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of leaders that are farmers. They're used to putting the seeds, put some water, we get money next month. This generation of leaders needs hunters. We don't know where that was going to come from. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we got to be hyper-focused to kill the prey whenever that happens. And that is a very different type of leader. Mm-hmm. So to me, there's a crisis of leadership in the world, as it is. If you think about now, took kids. I give classes, I teach to MBAs, roughly. Think of 24 to 26-year-olds. They have a true crisis of understanding of how this technology is going to affect their lives, which means their parents were completely unequipped to prepare them for that change. And when you talk to some of them, their parents are really competent professionals, but they don't study. They don't learn about things like AI. So all of a sudden, when it comes to finding a partner, for example, a lot of my students ask me about how am I going to get married? Because the problem they're dealing with is a problem their parents never had, right? Mm-hmm. If you have leadership in the home that does not try to actualize themselves with the conditions of what they are going through, they can never lead them properly. Mm-hmm. So I see that in companies, and I definitely see that at homes.
Super insightful. And I guess, yeah, legacy industries are going to be even more difficult to get this innovation across, right? Because they are farmers, like banking, insurance, and things like that, I suppose.
Well, I'll tell you the scary part. I work in the power industry. We have a business model that was developed in the 1880s. Centralized power, wire all the way to your home with a meter. Mm-hmm. If you've made money that way for centuries, the company I work for is 140 years old. Now you need to build a company that makes decisions intra-week. Today we make decisions intra-year, or sometimes intra-3 years. Mm-hmm. That's how we plan for the world. How do you build a monster like that to be adaptable? Mm-hmm. It sends a lot of leaders to the golf course and say, I'm going to retire. I don't care how this is going to work. I just want to make it my last 5 years, because this kind of change, I just don't know how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said though too about, like, necessity is the mother of invention idea, right? And in some of these markets, you're absolutely right.
Adversity is the mother
adversity.
Of invention.
There you go. Yeah. Super insightful.
I'm just blown away, honestly, by what you just said. I'm sat here and I'm like, God, everything is so true.
No, and it is. And I think the other thing just to add to it is, well, being a parent and hearing those kids and stuff too, is nothing in my life to date has been so ingrained in my life so quickly as AI. Like my
And now
adoption.
you're getting scared about it, aren't you?
It is.
Well,
My
I'll scare you
adoption
more
period.
a bit. We'll keep going, but I'll tell you some things you got to worry about for your kids.
Sure. No, like just my adoption period was one day I didn't use AI, and like a day later I never stopped using AI. Like, and it fundamentally changed everything I do at my work, at my desk, how I research, how I do everything. Right.
Right.
And I think that's a terrifying thing for me. So parents, like, what's the world going to be like for your kids if things change and everything is changing so fast, right? And AI just accelerated it. But what should I actually be scared of? What maybe I don't want to hear this part.
I'll use one example, which hits home to a lot of people. Selecting a life partner. Let me give you a scary statistic. The generation of our grandparents had 1 or 2 sexual partners in their lifetime. Our parents, 5 to 15. I mean, if they were in the freaky 60s, maybe 20. Our generation, around 50. And this is in North American standards, by the way, not Asian standards. Your kids, 300.
300. Wow.
Let me explain why. TikTok and the swipe left, what's that app?
Tinder.
Tinder
Yeah.
is a dating optimization solution.
Yeah.
You can do 2-3 meets that day. And if the reward function you're getting and the optimization problem is finding someone right now, the need to know who they are steps to the side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a technology nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
When you and I were looking for a partner, we were thinking, how do I find someone that I can live my life with? Their problem definition is, how do I find someone for right now? And the worst part is they can do it, right? I couldn't get out of school saying, how do I find someone for right now? That required investment, that required going out, meeting them, etc. For them, that is not required. So now, that's the downside of technology. Let me give you the upside of technology. The metaverse. If what you're looking for is companionship, and you confuse companionship with sexual interactions, maybe you just go put your goggles and have a metaverse meeting. Mm-hmm. And in fact, most women will have their first 3 or 4 dates in the metaverse. I will only meet you in person if I trust you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you have males, hyperactive capability to optimize multiple dates through Tinder, but you could have females protecting themselves by saying, I will not go out with you in physical terms until we do a digital no.
Yeah.
So the problem with technology is that it can do both. You can have Matrix,
It's just a tool.
or you can have Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right? How do you guide that? Is the key thing. Not just as a designer of AI in my case, but as a parent, there'll be good apps and there'll be bad apps. There'll be things that you want them to learn, and there's things you want them to learn so that they protect against them. Right? For me, what I like about this conversation is at every stage, we talk about quality of decision. You cannot take decisions anymore without data, regardless of what you do, regardless of what technology you use. Like, let's say, for example, your kid says, I really would like to do this. What's the evidence then that you want to do that? Show me the evidence. Why would you want to do that? Have you thought it through? What data are you using to say that you want to do this? Well, I don't have any. Well, that's not good enough anymore. Decisions without data are not good enough anymore. Same to you. Like, why do you let your kid get into social media? Well, I don't know. That's not good enough. Where's the evidence?
I watched this video this week, and someone was saying that they'd studied, I'll have to dig it out and link below, but they'd studied a bunch of 16-year-olds, and they'd asked them and just to interview them, find out what their thoughts and feelings were on AI. And quite a few of them kind of came back and said, we wish we'd never started using it, because my peers who aren't using it, they are writing their essays, they're critical thinking so much better, they're getting more intelligent as they're going through the process. I've been using AI to help me write my essays, and now I can't do it without it. I can't do it without that help. Our grades are the same, but I feel like their critical thinking skills and their intelligence is way above mine. I'm feeling more stupid by using it.
And let's think about that, what you just described. Who's at fault?
Education system?
Teacher.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. In my class, you want to write an essay? I want you to use 3 language models, not 1. And I want you to show me the differences between them. How are you scrutinizing the language model? What are they good at? What are they bad at? I'm going to ask more of you. You're going to write 3 reports, not 1. But what you're going to do is scrutinize and prepare 1 report based on those 3.
Yeah.
If the teacher doesn't teach them how to be critical about the assistance they're getting, the cognitive assistance they're getting, then they're not teaching them about how AI should be used. We're letting them ungoverned. It's the equivalent of going in our age to a math exam with a programmable calculator, which I did. Everything was able to solve because I just coded the calculator. No one knew. They just thought it was a simple calculator, right? Same thing. We're not teaching the tool to kids. So they're using it however they want. And yes, there are going to be those smart kids that scrutinize the tool. And there are going to be the dumb kids that just believe whatever the tool says. So in my view, the problem there is education. Like I said, a problem of leadership.
Maybe just a lack of education. Like this isn't being taught in high school, right?
Yeah,
like
no. There's a
AI
lot of gaps. Yeah.
and it needs to be taught at that earlier level because that's when the kids are going to start to use it, right? And so it needs to be brought into curriculum so much earlier.
Yeah, I think I always thought, okay, look, when I was thinking about my children, obviously like our children, not together, we've got separate children. Sorry, that sounded like we were married then. But like my kids, they're only kind of 5 and 4, so they're only young. But I've already been thinking, okay, well, when they start using AI, I want them to kind of make sure they're validating what they're reading there. So like any of the data points, making sure they're validating what they're hearing is correct. But it's the opinions that they're getting from the AI, and like you said, looking at 3 different, responses and then still having the ability, the critical thinking ability to actually then form your own opinion around it or have a different opinion to what the AI is telling you, again, it's those critical thinking skills.
I like that example because one of the debates I have with my sister, and my sister's a clinical psychologist. So she knows early childhood development actually quite well. She's taken a lot of effort to study that particular area in her research. We have a debate as to when is the right age. I like the conversation of when does humans develop critical thinking? How does that happen in the brain?
Great question. I would know the answer to that. Yeah, and that would be a very tough point to pin down, I would say as well.
And I tend to use this example as there's something called transfer learning. So the great thing of AI is we get to study a lot of stuff from neuroscience and try to apply it algorithmically, right? Sometimes poorly. But there's a concept called transfer learning. A 2-year-old knows that if something falls, needs to get out of the way without having to have it fallen in once. They see the event of falling. They understand gravity by transfer. By watching it fall somebody else, they can put 2 and 2 together. That's the early steps of critical, right? It's a critical function they're doing. And I don't have kids, by the way, but if I had a kid, I would teach them what lies look like with AI. Because one of the hard things about lying is that it's an emotional state. You lie to me, it's almost if it was an offense. But I can show the kid how AI lies without intention, because AI is not trying to lie to you. It's just telling you the approximation of something that is obviously true, but it's statistically probable, right? In that sense, I would argue that you need to engage kids with AI. You just need to know how to do it. Because your kids, their world is going to be physical digital. If you're 40 or less, you were born into a physical world. You learn coding in school, but your everyday interaction, I was a kid in the 80s, you go after school to the street and you got to come back before the lights are off. But you were a free range kid, let's put it that way. Your critical thinking was developed in not getting hurt in the street. And the number of people with a die cast, right, whether hand or were significant in the class every year. The only way that some of these kids are exploring the world is through technology. So if they're going to be physical digital, that means to get a loan, to get a job, to get married, they're going to need to be in the metaverse. If you don't teach them how to navigate that world early enough, you're crippling them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not allowing them to develop in the physical digital being that they have to become.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And for us, it's still an option, but for them, it will be non-optional. To get a mortgage, to apply to school, to do some basic things in society, they're going to have a digital entity and proficiency.
Yeah.
And that's got to start relatively early.
Well, I'm using AI with my kids.
Good.
But it's mainly like in the car the other day, my son said to me, how many cars would need to stack on top of each other to be as tall as Burj Khalifa?
That's a good question.
Obviously, I'm like...
It's exploring his curiosities, right?
Yeah, and he's great. He loves an encyclopedia, and that's what he wants to read before bed. He wants to read the encyclopedia. But 2 pages on the encyclopedia is not enough. Or he's got questions, and questions that Google and YouTube can't answer. And so then, before bed, I'm asking Gemini like his questions. But, I was in the car and we were at the traffic light. So I just did a quick voice to Gemini. And, then she kind of responds through the car radio and tells him exactly, how much, not exactly, but okay, if the car's yay high, this is how many you're going to need to be as tall as Burj Khalifa. And he's kind of getting his answer.
There's an exercise I could recommend for kids. Look, I'm not endorsing for kids to get early in technology. Do whatever you think you should do. But when they do, have them ask these 5 questions. What? How many, right? Then something about the present. If I had this right now, what would that be? So how many cars do I need? How many cars if they moved? Something active. Then why? Why are you saying that, ChatGPT? How do you know you're right? Where could you think you were wrong? Then you start testing the correlations that ChatGPT built. And sometimes ChatGPT will say, I don't know, I'm just guessing. So now I know that it's not that you're trying to lie, but I know the limitations of the data that you have or the representations that you've built. And then once you get the why, which is the most interesting one, then you go, what will? What will happen if I crush the cars by 10%? What will happen if I change the car to bicycles?
Yeah, what will happen if they're Porsche?
Yeah.
Or what are going to
Because
happen if they're Land Rover? Yeah.
What you're doing is you're testing the construct, the strength of the construct of that intelligence, that answer. And once you do the while, then ask a should question. Yeah. If I wanted to pile cars to reach the Burj Khalifa, which one should I use? What this does, it teaches the kid or whoever's interacting with AI how AI actually arrives at inferences. But it also teaches you about how to prompt it, how to use it. We need to, as much work as we can, learn how to use this model so that we know their limitations and know their bias. Because this is the scary part. Let me now scare you a bit. You ask about banking, right? In ChatGPT. Where do you think you got the data to learn from banking?
Honestly, I don't even know where the data comes from.
The world's banks.
Yeah, sure, makes sense.
So let me now scare you. Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers. Which bank do you trust to not have cheated, to not have lied, to not have been part of a particular problem? We remember 2008.
Yeah.
So it learned that as well. It not just learned the good things about banks.
Yeah.
And that's an argument right there.
Yeah.
It also learned the really bad things about banks.
I guess you take it further and if you start prompting questions about, politics or positions or morals or integrities.
The data set that these LLMs are built on contain the inner deficiencies of our society. So if it's going to learn about racism, it's going to have to go through the Holocaust portion of it, for example, through slavery. If it's going to learn about human rights, it's going to have to go through the worst crimes that exist documented of human rights. So it's a representation of us. When you think of ChatGPT, think of a mirror. Everything you ask is a reflection of us. And sometimes that reflection is scary. What scares me the most about AI is that it learns exactly from humans with all its deficiencies. So if I asked you, what do you think humans are biased about? We could have a conversation of 20 hours of all the bad biases that humans introduce. Think of unequal pay for women. ChatGPT knows that too. And it's going to give you an answer that is also biased by that.
But then and coming back to the title of this podcast, should we be outsourcing our decisions to AI if it is a mirror of us and it takes on all of those biases?
Well, especially in like parenting, because I mean, when we started the conversation, to have like an AI agent being there for your child, consistent, constant. I like that idea, right? And because sometimes you have a crappy day at work and you come back and you don't want to dump your emotions onto your child. So an AI agent or nanny, whatever you want to call it, seems like a wonderful idea. But now we talk about, tough issues, morals and ethics. Well, that's something that those decisions and how we approach those, I want to remain firmly in my hand, right? So I guess it's the tough point about decisions. What do we outsource? When do we always want a human control? I know there's arguments for like military and stuff like that, but like what should always be held with humans and what can we?
I think that line of separation is a false sense of control. Because it's not there.
That's not good.
It's not there. That's a reality.
Right.
Let me pose it to you this way. Remember our instructor questions, right? Let's do this exercise, and for those listening, try this at home. Ask about drugs. Marijuana. What is marijuana? Let's start with that question. You're going to get a relatively objective answer because there isn't that many debatable positions what marijuana is. We know the origin, we know what it does. Then what is happening with marijuana today in the world? Now, ChatGPT knows the anti-marijuana sources, the Bible-based ones or the religion-based ones. It also knows Snoop Dogg and the pro-marijuana positions. It's read through both of them. Then ask, why do we need marijuana? To ChatGPT. And that's where the representation starts going one way or the other. Because if there's more documentation online about pro-marijuana stances, its inert bias will be a positive position.
That's fascinating too, especially with in the US, there was so many cases now of women who are smoking marijuana when they're pregnant, right? And because the data may not be out there yet, or maybe there's a bias towards it being natural and healthy, but talk to a physician or a neuroscientist, and without seeing data, like we can assure you it's not something that you want to be doing, right?
There's many reasons for it.
There's many reasons, right? But it wouldn't be picked up by AI, right? Potentially, because it's just the pro thing. And it's just a very relevant example, I find, that marijuana question, because it's something that culturally North America is struggling with for the last few years.
It's been legal in Canada for a lot longer than it probably...
And popular opinion is outpacing science in a lot of this. So
if you learn how to question, then you can guide it to please look at the research first. Then ask the questions that help them scrutinize the source that you're looking at. Less Snoop Dogg, more neuroscience.
Yeah.
Right? That's why it's so important for humans to learn how decisions are made by AI.
I want to loop it back to that personal AI. So that's stage 4 you were talking about, is if you have that personal AI who is learning who you are, what's important to you, what your values are, then you're going to get a very different answer to those questions versus right now if we're just asking ChatGPT.
Now you got it.
But
what matters the most is the hyper personalization.
Yeah.
Isn't this being done already on like TikTok? Like,
with
for like the more sinister version, isn't this?
Well,
aren't they trying to build all of that so that they can make stuff and content more addictive to you? More,
yes.
Like, isn't there the evil side to all of it? Right? Like, we think it'll be a benevolent agent to help me shop, but like on the same purpose, it knows your ins and outs, what you swipe, what you click.
Well, I suppose it depends on how you productize this personal AI, right? Like if this personal AI is from Amazon.
Sponsored by Walmart.
It might have a very different agenda, right? It's going to try, or if it's built by Meta, that personal AI then might want to be serving you more content, keeping you within the algorithms, keeping you addicted. Whereas if you've got an independent personal AI who is there to generally support you and your life, and you've got that control over it, then hopefully it wouldn't be influencing you in that sinister way. It's not telling you what to buy, it's to support you.
I smile because after Element AI, I was part of a social media startup trying to lead the investigation for economic communities. And we did a study of reverse engineering, basically what TikTok does. When I share the example of Matrix or Star Trek, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The part that I'm optimistic about is that we will get at that point when I talk about design problem, that you get to design your own AI. You no longer depend on Meta, Amazon, Tesla, or any other to give you a large language model or an LLM, something more defined to you. You can assemble what you're looking for and put the right controls. Yeah. But for us to get there, it means that the average citizen needs to learn design engineering of AI, understand how that is put together, right? And that's why I think it's a couple generations, because to transform our educational system, to change our paradigms around the technology that helps us think, it will require some time for us to adapt, right? And it'll be a lot faster, the development of those algorithms, than the ability to know how to use them well. But in my view, once that stage 3 that we were talking about happens, is you're building that at home. You're not depending on it. You're preferring the providers that give you the assembly tools, that give you the Legos. And what you're doing is, look, this is what I want my personal orchestrator to do in my home based on the tools that I put together.
But I think that's important. Is that I would want that personal AI to not be influenced by any other third party.
That's a utopian.
Well,
because if your AI has data about the world, it's inherently influenced by it.
Okay, and I mean more just like
accept the influences that it'll give you.
I mean more like paid for by produced by Meta or Amazon or even Tesla, right?
But look, I mean, right? The fact is the world's never gonna be unbiased. I'll give you an example. Autonomous vehicles, the Tesla algorithm is the most advanced algorithm still. If at some point you're going to have a vehicle that is relatively autonomous, you do want the powered by Tesla because it's at least more sophisticated. What you also want is controls. Let me give you another concept that I just wrote a paper on the Institute, which is this discriminators. So Gen AI was originated by partially Canadian research on adversarial networks in University of Montreal. What that was is you have a generator, which is Gen AI, creating an image of a face, copying the sequence of real faces. And then you have a discriminator looking at this face and selecting which one is bound to be true and which one's false. Why did we build these adversarial networks? The old problem was I needed 50,000 photos of your face to identify you within the 90th percentile, right? To know that I can always identify you. But I not always had 50,000 pictures of your face. Let's say I only had 1,000. So what I do is I create synthetic pictures of your face to generate those 50,000, and I set up a game, an adversarial game. And the more the discriminator figured out which one was real and was not, the better the generator needed to fool the discriminator. That's where Gen AI began back in 2017. If you go to today's world, you will need a discriminator in your home to help your own generative AI assist you. There'll be things that it says, it'll be best if you leave now because the weather, the day, what's currently happening, there's a march happening in this area, go now. And then the discriminator would say, 80% of that is not right, or 80% is right, but adjust this.
And then
because there's a sequence that it identifies as generative that may not necessarily be right for what you're looking for. And it'll be an adversarial game to give you the best possible answer. So you won't be able to control the gen, but you will parameterize the discriminator. The future of cybersecurity, the future of someone calling your home and sounds and looks like your kid saying, I've been kidnapped, and you realizing that that's not true, it's because you will have a discriminator helping you through it.
I totally agree. I feel like the solution to a lot of this is AI. Right? The problems caused,
AI
the only
for AI.
solution is AI, right?
AI for AI.
I mean, even when you think of, I'm already panicking about it. My kids are young, but like social media, right? Like to monitor social media use, right? Or time on the internet and all of that. Like you can't, as a parent, keep up with it, right? So to have an AI to, like you said, just this discriminator to someone on your side that you can help to filter, control is.
We're about a year or two away from someone brilliant in marketing coming up with a better word than discriminator. Maybe AI nannies or something like that.
Yeah, discriminate.
But just like you see the explosion of Gen AI, there'll be an explosion of these nannies.
Yeah.
Of this human assistance. That's why I like symbiotic AI, because it's bound to be from that way, where humans don't need to be experts in the tool to develop tools to help manage the tool.
Yeah.
Just like you would have 5, one optimizing your closet, one optimizing your workout routine, one optimizing your food, one optimizing your calendar, one optimizing your sleep, and then you'll have someone orchestrating everyone to make sure that it's all according to how you like it. That birth of the nannies, the orchestrators, the discriminators at the end is something that is really needed. And it'll be a new category in industry, investment idea.
I feel like it's like when we talk about your exec functions and your cognitive functions, it's almost like having that AI that's like almost acts like your exec functions, managing all of those other pieces.
Well, just to offload, back to decision fatigue, just to offload all of these decisions, right? So you can focus on the priority ones, right? Yeah. Like if you can, and we always talk, and Michelle has this fantastic idea that I adopted now too, is like a decision list, not a to-do list, right? Just to make sure that you're if decisions are finite, then we want to make sure we're spending our decisions on the things that matter most, right? And now if you can have AI to take care of from groceries and things like this, like it actually, hopefully, theoretically, could free up your decision capacity for your kids, for your loved ones, for your, like, and that's the thing that excites me with it.
It is, but the thing that worries me about it as well is that right now businesses are looking at AI going, that's going to free up more capacity for them to do more rather than freeing up capacity to relieve some of the human stress that we're
full
all
circle.
feeling,
Yeah, back to the limitations of the brain.
To your decision list, let me share something I've been doing with companies. God, I think the first one I did was BC Hydro in 2010. It's called a decision needs analysis. A decision needs analysis is something you do with a spreadsheet and key people in the business. Nothing to do with technology. It's like, regardless of what technology we use for business intelligence, what are your top 5 decisions? Tell me. And a lot of companies struggle, but the good ones have people that understand, you know what, I really need to make this. And then you ask them what data you need for it. What data are you using for that key decision? Becoming aware of your own key decisions. To me, that exercise is the best exercise to design the right AI. Because it doesn't matter the volume, what it matters is the impact of those decisions. And that paradigm is a great paradigm by which to lead a company. Because they're always going to be overwhelmed by 10 fires that need to be put up. But if you address the top 5 decisions, your company will stay afloat, will definitely work well, right? And that awareness creates the muscle by which we become more optimizers of our function, not just operators of our function. Let me give you an example. When we were in GE, we used this example of GE turbines. And in the Dubai airport, you have to take off at a particular angle to minimize the amount of sand coming into your turbines. Because that, over 20,000 of hours of flight, could really mean a 20% degradation of useful life of the turbine. But the angle you take off is a function of number of particles per million in the air flow, direction, speed, right? So you cannot make that decision but 2 to 3 minutes before takeoff. Now, if you're asking that from a pilot, you basically need to take away the takeoff complexity, the gas complexity, anything else that he needs to check, and instead free up some bandwidth and give him some algorithm so that he can make the right call at the right time. The kind of AI that is in the pilot's cockpit make him an optimizer of the flight. He knows what angle to take off. He knows what altitude to fly in to extend the life of the turbine. But we've automated takeoff parameters. We've automated benzene optimization. We've automated where to route for optimizing for turbulence, right? So in that sense, we already do decision needs in a function like flying. It just needs to be done everywhere.
Love that. And I want to just also come back to another example. So I sat next to the head of HR for McLaren F1 at an F1 event in Singapore last year. And she was just saying, we were talking about decision fatigue, and she just said, every single person in the company is very focused on one. All of your decisions have to lead up to one goal. Does it make the car go faster? And she's like, this isn't just for the driver, and this just isn't for the pit crew. This is the HR team, the marketing team, the everyone who's kind of coming on tour, traveling the world with them. Like, will it make the car go faster? And having such a clear goal, like every single decision that you're making, it's like, and as head of HR, she was just saying, we've got to make sure people have got access to a gym when they're away, that they're eating healthy food, they've got access to healthy food and everything else, because all of those things, not just for the driver and the pit crew, for everybody on the team, are going to help them perform better and then ultimately help the car go faster.
I like that because it shows the hyper focus on an optimization problem, right? Now imagine that they all had ChatGPT and they ask, okay, what do I need to do today to make the car work faster? What should I be doing right now? Why would that work? When will it happen? And what should I be doing? That structure of thinking teaches you a lot about the car and the conditions around the car that you may not necessarily know, right? The way we ran cars before is not the way that we should be running in the future. Right? So in my sense, it's exciting because you get cognitive support from a technology. It almost puts a mirror to human intelligence, and you start matching capabilities of our brain with technology. And then the orchestrator of those capabilities, you want memory, or you want what's the part of the brain that uses memory?
Hippocampus.
There's a technology-based hippocampus that can interact with your hippocampus.
Yeah, right.
There's human reasoning, there's hypothalamus, your emotions. How do you control your emotions? So in my view, is if you create a schematic, an ontology of how intelligence works, you have things that technology can do for you, the technology-based tasks, and then you'll have the human-based tasks. And this combination is a lot more powerful than one or the other on its own.
You focus on the strengths. No, I love it. Yeah. I love the F1 example too, because it shows, ultimately a business or a team or a family is the sum of the decisions that are being made, right? Like how fast a car goes is the sum of all of those decisions that all those people are taking. That's the name of our podcast, is every decision counts, right? And because it is, we are the sum of our decisions. And I think at large, and a big reason for us starting this podcast is just to make people more aware that their decisions are important. Quite often we just go into auto drive, or we use AI and maybe we're unloading decisions that we should be taking for ourselves because it's an important part of our life or our purpose or whatnot. So I think it's just, pulling it all back around to that every decision counts component.
And maybe to give your listeners something to guide themselves by, which is not going to change. You're becoming data-driven. Your everyday is becoming data-driven as a human. AI, the value of AI to you is based on how it enables you to be data-driven. So let's talk about those decisions. When should I take my kid to school? What data are you using to prove that that's the right answer? If you connect those dots and the AI is not useful, don't use it. But there's some important questions, like when do I let my kid have his own iPad? And what data are you using to support that? ChatGPT can help you with that. You don't need to be a neuroscientist reading through journals to be able to get that piece of evidence, right? But evidence matters a lot, because when humans are driven by intuition, we get a lot of things wrong. I like the idea of becoming data-driven because it simplifies the hype around AI. And it improves the decisions that you make.
You're here. I can't not ask the questions.
Sure. Terminator
And the Matrix and everything else.
The most important question.
Is it possible that AI could deem us incapable of being able to make our own decisions and takes them away?
So this is a topic of a lot of debate. And if you want to get two nerds to fight each other in Montreal, this is a great question to ask.
Amazing.
There's the practical answer and there's the theoretical answer. Let me start with the theoretical answer. Once we get to general intelligence, enough data about the universe to be beyond whatever humans can comprehend, there could be a model of models, because you're going to need to have a lot of contributors to it, that outperforms humans in what humans do. Maybe not at the level of empathy or dignity, but definitely at anything that we think of as necessary, it could outperform us. And if that was in the hands of someone that loves to control society, yeah, you could probably do it. One of the most scary things, if I had to write a novel to scare people, it's that digital dictatorship. The fact that you can take people's agency and spare it away by outsmarting them to a point of subserviency. That is very possible.
The scary part to me, though, is that type of entity or general intelligence. It would be smart enough that we would never know, or potentially be smart enough that we would never know. And it's not going to be Terminators, right? I mean, we've seen how social engineering is happening now, right? That's the scary part for me, is it could happen instantly, like with computational power. But two is, if it's that smart, it's not going to necessarily throw Terminators in this. Humans are way too easy to manipulate.
Let me give you the scary part. I mean, I graduated in 99 and I am a computer scientist, so Matrix forever.
It's
the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people in this world, which some are my friends, and I am sometimes with the right depression, I will agree with them. Matrix is perfectly possible. And we will be happy enough to live in it.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why it's so powerful.
Remember the people in the Matrix, they wanted to be plugged back in, right?
That's right. Yeah. Kenny Reeves, another Canadian. All right. Now, Star Trek. And that's why I say Matrix and Star Trek. If the designers of AI today, if our peers in Canada and the US, in Germany, and the UK, decide to design around human principles, it is very possible that the future of society is an empowerment-driven society, like Star Trek.
Do you get the Star Trek?
You're not Trekkie?
She's way cooler than us.
Sorry.
Someone was popular in high
She's
school.
the one with Darth Vader, right? That's
Yeah. I'm not that bad, but yeah, I'm not.
The idea of
Trekkie.
empowerment is that humans have sorted out how technology makes the best version of themselves. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've been advocating for with Joshua Benjamin and a big group, there's about 90 researchers in the world, is a world agency of AI, just like we do nuclear power. We shouldn't have to guess what's the right way to do this. It shouldn't be open to interpretation. Today, with nuclear energy, when you put up a nuclear power plant, we don't have opinions. We have a very set standards of how safety works with nuclear power. We should be doing the same with AI. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a world regulating body of AI. Obviously, when you offer that to the UK and the US in the previous Paris summit, they denied it because there's political agenda that facilitate the growth of existing companies by not regulating. And sure, innovation will happen from it. But in one way or the other, humanity needs to get to a point where we know how to do AI in a way that empowers society, not the way that destroys or affects it. It has the power of doing both. And general intelligence, hopefully it'll happen at a time when we have learned some of these lessons. Mm-hmm. Because the nuclear agency didn't happen until we blew up in Japan and realized that we could destroy the entire humanity with it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not that it happened out of altruism. It happened based on, oh crap, we could really blow ourselves away. So I think AI will have a moment or two or reckoning where the impact is large enough for us to realize we can't keep going this way. unfortunately.
That's terrifying.
But
How far away do you think general intelligence? A ways? I mean, to me, because AI is still just like
that's a fun question. To
it's
ask.
still a super fancy Excel spreadsheet. Like, it's not, general intelligence is such a leap for me still. But am I wrong? Is it closer than we think? Like,
Whatever I say, because I'm going to share this with my friends and colleagues, I just want to say I'll get it wrong. No matter what I say, I'll probably get it wrong.
So bring on the comments. Like, let's
Yeah.
let's talk about
I'm
it.
happy to be debated on this. It's a lot closer than we think.
yeah.
There are people, I'm not, within the really smart people, I'm the dumb person, right? So there's people I sit in a room with, like Joshua Benjo, and I realize, damn, I'm dumb. But I understand enough to know why I'm dumb. They're scared.
Never that close.
So if Jeffrey Hinton and Joshua Benjo are scared, I know enough to know we probably should be scared too.
Yeah.
What drives this innovation at the end is power and money. What we're scared about is not the speed of advancement, because what has created this wonderful AI that we have, which is wonderful, is open source. Is everyone gets to contribute as a community. Forget about patents. Whatever you're thinking is the best today, 6 months from now will be better. The downside of open source is we're moving at a pace that no one understands fully. When power and money drive this, now you're really susceptible to the bias of those that want to control it. So general AI is mathematically possible. Structurally, we've kind of proven how it could work. The conditions are not there yet because the data necessary to make it happen, the compute necessary to make it happen, is not controlled by one person, thank God. So we have the gift of segmentation, and with the geopolitics we have now, China and the US are not working together on anything. Right? That's actually kind of a blessing because that will slow it down. But I think it's a lot closer than people believe it is. How close? Here's my obviously wrong guess.
Give us days and hours.
I used to think, you asked me this 10 years ago, I would say 100 years.
Yeah.
Now, I'm honestly hoping that I will be dead by the time it happens.
Is this one of these things where we're actually much further along than the general public know
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Well, there's no future where, like, I mean, it's a singularity. Like, in a black hole, like, we don't know much about black holes, but we do know that once you enter a black hole, at some point in time, you'll have to end up there. It's just a fact of physics, right? Like, to us to hit general intelligence is, it has to, like, it will happen. Absolutely. I don't see a future where it doesn't.
There's an aspect that, and look, that obviously there's a lot of angles behind this because you got to have the societal angle, you have to have the economic angle, right? But how difficult it is for humans to collaborate on anything is one of the saving graces of why we're not getting to general intelligence faster. Because it's not going to be one monolithic entity. In fact, there's a line of thinking around the MIT graduates who believe on an edge, or what we call mesh fragmentations, meaning intelligence happens very segregated and it's a lot harder to coordinate or orchestrate. So that to me is one of those things that something has to happen to society before we can get to a truly general intelligence that controls the earth. Because society needs to reach a point of unity for this orchestration to happen. Now, can that orchestration happen unbeknownst to humans? That's the part that some of us get a little scared about. And there is where a lot of us computer scientists or algorithmic focused people completely escape the fact that what makes society work is the human condition. There we need psychologists and sociologists to perhaps contribute to the argument, because from where we see it algorithmically, there's controls, but you can never trust human behavior, right? It's always volatile. So for me, what I'm scared more of is not general intelligence, is the abuse of the existing intelligence that we currently have, and people like Elon Musk or capable, power hungry, and with money, able to do it in a way that goes against a certain group, goes against a certain interest or a certain value of humans, right? And if you had a modern Hitler-like figure with enough knowledge, access, power, and money to do something like OpenAI, that's what scares me more. I think that's actually if I was to give you the probability of things to be worried about, that's what I would be worried about more.
So heavy.
Sorry.
I'm like,
Or Star Trek.
But Star Trek.
Or Star Trek.
Better than Star Trek.
yeah, okay.
You want me to give you a good news thing?
Yeah.
Okay. There's something called hyper-connected networks. What hyper-connected networks is treating humans and technology as one network. Think of human to human. What we have right now in TikTok is hyper-connected networks. The future of work, especially for those that are underprivileged, segregated in the middle of nowhere with no access to economic value, could very well be that through just having internet, they become part of a valuable network. Concrete example. There's a group called Connected Women in the Philippines. These are 100,000 women. A lot of them live in fishing villages. They have husbands that are in prison, or they've been beaten up, or they're underprivileged for many reasons. Yet they access this network of connected women to do annotation today. They help annotate images for the purpose of building AI. Now they make $10, $20 a day, but that changes their life. When you bring technology in, these networks are perfectly capable. We can build jobs that never thought existed. We can add value in between the value areas of society, of your life, that helps a lot. Now, let's talk about your personal assistant. Imagine that personal assistant was a collection of women sitting in Nepal, another area, that use Gen AI to help you with your day. And you're paying just the same, but it's not a pure algorithmic capability. It's an empowered human helping you with your day. They don't need to speak English because they have the language translation immediately. They're specialized on, one is specialized on your pills that you take every day. Another one's so specialized in your children's diet. Let's say one is allergic to gluten. And for that half an hour they spend with you, they make $2, $3. But that's everything to them. That hyper-connected network can completely change the economic reality of the underprivileged. And we're not designing those networks right now because the technology is fairly new. But the great thing with networks is they can have recommendation engines. Just like TikTok tells you, watch this because it'll generate more value. You can have these networks optimized for the purpose of addressing those that need it the most. And the kind of know-how they need, how can they contribute to society, and how much effort they need to be able to contribute is actually very low.
Yeah, it's a massive multiplier effect, right? Yeah.
I argue, when I have this conversation of with humans, with AI take our jobs, I argue that I could actually see a world where AI creates a 10x jobs than what we have right now.
Wow.
And then you have little gigs. I work half an hour a day on this pill optimization role where I'm looking after old ladies' need to take their pill at the right time. And I do that with 20 ladies across Europe and North America. And I sit in the Philippines in Davao. And that gives me enough money to pay my rent and feed my children.
That's a good point to end on. Yeah. Not the
So Star Trek and Matrix.
Okay. Oh my God.
It's such a great topic. Yeah. And I think it's so fascinating just because it's we're exploring it, right? Like this is a frontier that we haven't. There's no one's done this before. So
there's days I come back home and I need a hug and a drink, right? And there's days
from
I
a
come
real
back
person,
home
right?
from,
Not an AI agent.
Yeah. Or dog. Actually, dog, you'll be fun. But if I show you my feed on Insta, it's a lot of puppies there. There's no like, I just want to watch a puppy and forget about all this crap. And there's days that I come genuinely energized and hoping that I could live 30 more years.
Yeah.
Because what we're able to do now, we're going to need about 50 years to really get it right. And I honestly wished I was just graduated from school. Because by the time it becomes interesting, I've already wanted to play golf and read books. I won't have the energy for
You'll
it.
be worried about those pills to take at the
Yeah.
right time.
Exactly.
I could listen to you talk all day, and probably ask stupid questions, but this whole thing is just so fascinating, and I've never heard some of these things explained in the way that you have.
Well,
I'm so grateful for you coming to talk to us today, and I'm sure we're going to get tons of questions, and we might have to bring you back on.
Sure.
Answer some more.
It's important. Like your perspective, I think, is just such more people need to hear it, right? Especially leadership and things like that, like integration with the human component. It's thank you so much for being on. It's fascinating.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I take any chance I get to talk about this stuff because I love it. And I also think it's necessary, to be honest. The more that we think about it differently, the better we can do a job at bringing it into humanity, right?
We will tag all of Lewis's channels and everything below. So if you'd like to connect, you've got any questions, please ask and in the comments, and we'll definitely get back to you. And really, thank you so much for listening or watching. I hope you've been as fascinated by the subject as us.
Yes, thank you so much for being on, and please comment, please reach out to Lewis. I'm sure he'll be willing to connect with you, and hopefully we'll have you back on.
Yeah, and if you're a data scientist, be kind to my predictions. I may have gotten
It's all right. I'm still waiting for the neuroscientist to come for Shawn. So I've got to get the marketers coming for me. So
we have a particularly hostile community sometimes when we say something inaccurate.
Yeah.
We rebel on it.
Scientists at large, just not just data scientists.
Exactly.
I'm like, bring it on. Bring it on. To all of our listeners, thank you again, and make every decision count.